I was thinking a little while ago about the saints. The word saint means Holy One. We all have a favorite saint. For me, it's St. Francis of Assisi. And I want you to think about your favorite saint. There's been so many: St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Paul of the Cross, St. Dominic, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, so many different saints. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, now a blessed. And so many different saints. And one common element of the saints, think of this. Whatever saint that you have as your favorite, or any of the saints that you've heard about, one common element of the saints is this: they suffered. For example, St. Francis of Assisi, you may not know this, the founder of the Franciscans, he died when he was 40 years old. He was only about this tall, just about 5'1" or so, and when he died, he was blind. Mother Teresa, we've all heard about, it was out in the news recently that she was suffering with depression or feeling like she was distant from God. Here's this holy woman, this wonderful, beautiful woman, and yet she was undergoing a depression of sorts, they say. And then, of course, St. Paul of the Cross, the founder of the Passionist community. He lived to be 81 years old, and that in itself is a suffering. Any of you who are in your 80s, you know what it is to be in your 80s. And for many years, scholars tell us about 40, 50 years, he suffered with a dryness, a desert in his soul regarding prayer. Yet, what I love about Mother Teresa, St. Paul of the Cross, St. Francis of Assisi, they all had this wonderful joy to them, even in the midst of their sufferings. And you need to understand that I believe that God works through the trials, the tribulations. In the world you will have tribulation, Jesus tells us. The circumstances, the relationships, the physical sufferings that we have. This is the stuff, if you will, that God uses to make us holy. Let me tell you about some people that I've met. I think about my dad, for one, and his suffering. And I remember a girl that I met in the seminary. She's now, after the seminary, it was about 10 years after I visited her in New Orleans. Her name is Joan, and I remember as I came to visit her, she was kind of walking like this. She had her little baby with her, and she was walking like this, and she was shaking. And now she's 40 years old, and I thought maybe she had injured her knee or something. I said, "Joan, what's wrong?" And she said, "Well, don't you remember when I was in the seminary that I had multiple sclerosis, and now it's progressed, and I'm having trouble walking." But when she said that, there she was with her little baby, with this wonderful smile on her face, and it was such a witness to me that she was bearing her suffering so well. And I could see that God was working in her through her suffering. Now, I want to say something very quickly. God doesn't give you the suffering that you're dealing with. Think about your own, the physical, relationships, circumstances. God doesn't give you that, but God uses it to purify us. You need to understand that. I think about one of our priests, Father Neil Parsons. He lived to be 95 years old. Last year he died. We called him Methuselah. Methuselah in the Bible lived to be about 400 years old. Well, Father Neil lived to be 95 years old. I mean, he was just always there. Well, for the last 15 years of his life, he was blind. He had a degeneration in his eye of some sort, both eyes. He was blind. But the man was so gentle, so positive. He smiled. He was happy, even though he had to be led around. I never heard him complain about his blindness. I saw that in Father Neil, God had worked a great work in him to purify him. I think about my own dad. I told you about him really quickly. My dad, when he was in the military, he was in the Navy. He was a healthy, young 19-year-old, just happened to be there, and a piece of metal flew out, hit him right in his eye, seared one of his pupils shut. He became blind in his right eye just because of a split-second accident. Wasn't his fault. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, here's my dad now blind, and he got discharged from the Navy. He became a carpenter with one eye. Now, most people can't do it with two, and Dad did it with one, and what an attitude he had. I used to work with him in the summer as a carpenter. Oh, by the way, that's how I knew I had a call to the priesthood. I was a lousy carpenter, let me tell you. I don't know if that happened to Jesus too, but anyway, well, it was my dad's attitude and the way he did things and how he never complained. I saw that, see, what happens is we all come out of our mother's womb selfish and narcissistic and me-oriented, and what the sufferings of our life do, they can purify us, or they can have the opposite effect. They can make you bitter. And that's what I want to say right now. You know what? Your life right now can either make you better or bitter. It can either make you have a breakdown or a breakthrough. It can either be a prison or a prism through which you see new light. It can either be a tombstone or a stepping stone. And that's all up to you. It's your choice. You see, attitude, please get this, attitude is a major part of holiness. I think for us, we always think a holy person is somebody that just kind of goes to church and kneels and looks holy. Well, that may be holiness to you, but it's not holiness to me. You know what holiness to me is? A person who smiles, has energy, lives with passion. Although they're even going through some hard stuff, a person who knows that God is working in their life, purifying them in the tribulations, in the trials. I just got an email 2 weeks ago from a father, and he said, Father Cedric, I was at one of your missions in Houston. Would you visit my son? My son was in a car accident, and something's going on in his life about God, and he needs to talk to a priest. So I went over to visit the son, 19 years old. He was addicted to cocaine. He was on drugs and got in a car accident that almost killed him. He was in a coma. While he's in the coma, he has withdrawal from cocaine addiction. They say that that's one of the worst things that you can go through. Now, here he is in the hospital, in a coma, doesn't even know it, and he's going through withdrawal. So, he went through all that pain and didn't even know it. Then finally comes out of the coma. Many of his bones were broken. He's in rehabilitation now. He lived. Many of the doctors said he wouldn't even live. And now he's believing that God is at work in his life. He used to have God in his life, then he kind of lost God, went the way of addictions and drugs and everything else, and all of a sudden he's seeing his accident as a wake-up call that God is working in his life. Now, some people, and I talked to that young man and I thought, wow, he's made a choice here. He could have either been bitter or better. Some people get in an accident and they blame God. They say, God, why'd you do this to me? Why did I get cancer? Why do I have arthritis? And they're mad at God. Don't be mad at God. God's not the one who did it to you. God's the one that will take you through to another level. God's the one that will bring holiness out of it if you'll let him. I've discovered that in all the sufferings that we go through, God's at work. Don't be mad at God. God's the one that can take you through. So I am so glad for this young man, gave him some of my books, and I believe that God's working in his life in a very beautiful way. And he sees that God is purifying him. So, first thing I want to say about holiness is this. You have a choice. You can either be bitter or better. We all have some flavor of suffering in our life. Whether it's a relationship that's hard, it could be the kids, the in-laws, the husband, the neighbors or whatever, that's one way. There's physical sufferings, there's circumstances, there's trials. Now, I started off talking about the saints. They had it too. But they allowed God to work in them, to purify them, to sanctify them, and make them holy. And I'm praying that you will see your everyday life, your relationships, your circumstances, the stuff that you're dealing with, children that are crying, different things like that. I pray that you'll see that as an opportunity, not an obstacle, but an opportunity for God to work. Don't just live with passion.